everyone. Today's chapter is John chapter 19, and John chapter 19 is all about Good Friday. Jesus is sentenced to be crucified, then he's actually crucified, dies, and then is buried. So that all takes place in John chapter 19. I found quite a bit in this chapter, and I used my dad's study Bible in order to help me because this is a story that most of us are quite familiar with. So I wanted to gather some other thoughts that maybe you didn't know. So verse 1, it starts, verse 2, it says they made a crown of thorns and they clothed him in a purple robe. And that just really shows them mocking him when he was claiming to be king, even though he was, because they put a robe on him that was purple, which is the color of royalty, and that just really emphasizes that they wanted to make known that he was claiming to be king. And then verses 4 through 16, you see Pilate kind of being pressured into letting Jesus go to be crucified. At first, he was very firm in his belief. He says in verse 4, I find no basis for a charge against him. And then when you go down to verse 16, it says, finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. And we see in verse 8 that he becomes more afraid when the people aren't having it. They want Jesus to be crucified. And so Pilate eventually gives in to what others believe, which I think is an important aspect of the story. Verse 17, it begins with saying, carrying his own cross. And I think that's an act of him like personally carrying the weight of his sins on his back when he was carrying the cross, which gives, we can see him on the cross, but having him to carry the cross is just another way of looking at it. Verses 19 through 20, they made a sign that says Jesus of Nazarene, the King of the Jews, and they wrote the sign in 3 different languages, in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. And that really stands out to me because they wanted everybody who spoke those languages to know what Jesus was claiming to be. And so the fact that they didn't write it in just one language, but all 3, was kind of striking. And if we go to verse 24, they divided Jesus' clothes and then cast lots for their garments. So one of the things I wanted to do and using my dad's study Bible was find where prophecies were fulfilled. So if we go back to Psalms 22, 16 through 18, let's see. It says, dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All of my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garments. So that's kind of one of the first prophecies that was fulfilled back in Psalms. They said that they would pierce his hands and feet, which is true when Jesus was on the cross, and that they would cast lots for his clothes. Something funny that I noticed in verse 25, it says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, whose name is Mary, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. So 3 of the 4 women standing there were named Mary. I just found that kind of funny. If we go to verse 29, they put the sponge, in order to give Jesus a drink, they put it on a stalk of the hyssop plant. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. But back in Exodus 12, verse 22, that's kind of when the plagues were going on and the Passover, and they used the hyssop plant. They were instructed to use the hyssop plant to put blood over the door frame. So I thought that was kind of an interesting tie-in. And then when Jesus was dead, the soldiers decided not to break Jesus' legs. And that was predicted in 3 different parts of the Old Testament that I found. So that's Exodus 12, verse 46, Numbers 9, verse 12, and Psalms 34, verse 20. So all of those were kind of predicted all the way back in the New Testament, and then they were fulfilled just in this one action. And then when going back a little bit, when in verse 30, when it says, with that he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. His spirit does not mean his Holy Spirit, rather his human spirit, because he was both fully God and fully man. So I thought that was interesting as well. I don't think I have anything else to say, so I know that was kind of a lot from chapter 19, but I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.